Good morning, everyone. We are the Group Gamla, and we will be reporting our second case study analysis, which talks about ethics in chemical engineering workplace. For our case study, we chose the ethics in chemical regulation, which entitled The Case of Rich.
As a chemical engineer, we always face different chemicals, and sometimes we wonder how these chemicals are being discarded or if these chemicals are being used continuously. This will pose many problems that today we will talk about, find some solutions and alternatives, and lastly, we will give our conclusion and recommendation on this topic. The proper regulation of chemical is one of the problems in an industrial plant. Knowing the cause of this said problem and planning how to lessen and prevent it from happening in the future. One of the said problems is overproduction of chemicals, may it be man-made or naturally produced. This is due to heavily dependence on chemicals to produce new products. As the economy continuously developing, the dependence on chemical also increases. For this reason, it was categorized as an urgent and important problem to be solved. One of the proposed solutions is the implementation of REACH. This alternative fits the listed decision criteria that ensures safety of the workers, involved preservation of the environment, and had less effect on the economy. In conclusion, implementation of REACH with the assist of two alternatives will greatly reduce the problem listed on the case study. To further discuss, here is Kathleen, who will talk about the problems in our topic.
Problem statement. Problem. The increasing production of chemicals, either man-made and natural, human exposure to large number of chemicals of natural and human-made origins, and the ethical implications of chemical hazards and risks. For problem number 1, the use of chemicals has been increasing mainly due to the economic development in various sectors, including industry, agriculture, food processing and distribution, drugs, cosmetics, and transport. It has been estimated that approximately 1,000 new chemicals come into the market every year, and about 100,000 chemical substances are used on a global scale. For the second problem, since there is an increase in chemical production, people are exposed to a large number of chemicals of natural and human-made origins. The trouble is that chemicals may have unintended and harmful effects both on human health and the environment. They may have immediate, acute effects as well as chronic, long-term consequences. Chronic, low-level exposure to various chemicals may result in a number of adverse outcomes, including damage to the nervous and immune systems, impairment of reproductive function and development, cancers, and organ-specific damages. For the third problem, chemical hazards and risks are central when addressing the ethical issues in chemical engineering. Most chemicals have not been duly tested for their environmental and health impacts beyond light toxicity tests. The incompleteness of our knowledge about chemicals and the actual possibility for chemical engineers to produce a safer and greener chemistry thus engage the whole community of chemical engineers from an ethical standpoint. The symptoms of underlying problems is that the ethical implications of chemical hazards and risks that affect the people and the environment. One of the most crucial ethical issues that chemical plants face is the safety of the people that may affect the overall plant production. Ethics serve as the underpinning of safety and process safety in a plant. That's why it must be tackled properly. All issues are crucial as all of them puts the people's safety in the line. And last part is differentiating between importance and urgency. The increasing production of chemicals, either man-made and natural, is deemed as important. Next is that the human exposure to large number of chemicals of natural and human-made origins are also important. Third one is the ethical implications of chemical hazards and risks. This one is urgent because ethical issues must be tackled in chemical industry as it leads to multiple ways to failure. Developing policies to help the industry can greatly help because these international initiatives define the policy of further regulations to be implemented locally as well as exposure or emission limits. This regulation defines a policy framework which covers risk assessments of chemical and harmonized labeling up to tackling obsolete and stockpiled products.
Now that we already know the problems in this study, it's time that we identify the solutions or the alternatives. Now from this study, we have identified 3 alternatives. The first alternative is the implementation of the environmental protection policies. The second alternative is the establishment of precautionary principles in environmental law and chemical regulation. The third alternative is the implementation of REACH regulation, after which we have evaluated and determined which among the alternatives is the most crucial in maintaining the plant's safety ethically. The first alternative is that this regulation is based on the assumption of the nature's ability to eliminate the production and the consumption residues and the possibility of its regeneration eventually. Environmental protection policies are represented and justified according to how the humankind acquit themselves with respect to the nature. New policies are processed and stabilized in a superpositional manner, implying that previous policies are not necessarily eliminated. The environmental policies proposed are as follows. The first is the curative environmental policy. According to this policy, nature can no longer cure itself. It should be helped to repair the damage inflicted upon it. Following this perspective, what has been polluted can be cleaned up, what has been destroyed can be restored, and what cannot be safeguarded can be replaced, be it by natural processes or through human intervention. Now, as soon as damages become irreversible, this situation changes from a curative to a preventive type of policy. This means that such reparation is simply impossible. We can only prevent what we understand because, as they say, it is difficult to prevent a problem that is not understood and even more difficult to prevent the unknown, which is very often caused by the release of chemicals into the environment. Prevention usually addresses known risks for which full risk assessments leading to quantitative estimates of exposure of various groups and estimates of expected damage can be delivered. As a consequence, a preventive policy assumes that science is able to find a precise solution to any kind of problem. Now, for the anticipatory environmental policy, from the word itself, it is based on the precautionary principle. Such principle is about collective, potential, uncertain, and hypothetical threats. Not only that the damage has not occurred, but is also no irrefutable proof that it will occur at all. For the precaution and phronesis, precaution and precautionary principle are often considered to be just contemporary form of prudence. However, phronesis is actually more in-depth related to decision-making and action in cases of indeterminacy and uncertainty. Precaution and the precautionary principles are not about ourselves and the city only. These are, as I said, related to decision making and action in order to take care of the earth and the humankind, understood as a universal interrelated whole. Now, for the second alternative, this chemical regulation is integrated through an active open-ended process of decision making over the years. The European chemical regulation and the precautionary principle was gradually implemented in order to foster the transition from the preventive type of environmental policy to the anticipatory one. Series of studies has been done in order to come up with new precautionary strategy or approach to ensure the greater safety to humans and the environment by recognizing and assessing the risk posed by harmful chemicals, including the persistent organic pollutants or POPs. A precautionary mechanism and procedures were also established in order to avoid potential future use of some harmful substances. Now, for the third alternative, this regulation is introduced as a series of new obligations and procedures that aims to improve the protection of human health and the environment against the risk of chemical exposure. REACH is actually an acronym for registering, evaluating, authorizing, or restricting the production of, or even forbidding chemical substances. Following the no data, no market principle, some ethical and economic objectives are put forward, including the need to classify the chemicals as to whether they are carcinogenic, mutagenic, or reprotoxic, and if the chemicals pose a persistent organic pollutant risk. Some dangerous chemicals or substances of very high concern are being ruled out if safer alternatives are available following the principle of substitution. Dangerous chemicals may be banned unless proven by the chemical industry or importers that these are safe for the human health in the environment, which is referred to as reversal of the burden of proof by the REACH regulation. After thoroughly evaluating all the alternatives, we have come up with several decision criteria that will determine which alternative is best for the issue. And these are: enhance the competitiveness of the European chemical industry, promotes alternative methods for the hazard assessment of substances in order to reduce the number of tests on animals, ensure a high level of protection for human health and the environment, ensure the efficient functioning of the internal market, stimulate the innovation in the chemical industry. Now, for the final decision, the most ideal alternative that fits all the decision criteria laid out in the previous section is the implementation of the REACH regulation. However, the other alternatives should also be implemented alongside with this regulation to ensure the constant protection of the human health and the environment ethically.
As we deal with dangerous substances such as chemicals, being safe and knowledgeable is not enough. That's why ethics and chemical regulation should come hand in hand. REACH regulation only requires chemical companies to produce at or above the level of 1 metric ton per year to conduct a risk assessment and demands the conduct of chemical safety assessments for all the chemicals produced from the companies that produce more than 10 tons or more per year. So REACH reinforces the weight of expertise in the political decision making. It nevertheless remains to be seen whether such as an ethical challenge could turn out to be compatible with the economic system based on consumption, competition, and individualism. This is one of the reasons why future chemists should keep in their mind strongly open to ethics. Furthermore, people should bear in mind that community rolling action plan is recent and that the road will remain long and difficult. While REACH needs the protection of the environment, it does not clearly define what people should protect, and that is one of the reasons why future chemists and chemical engineers should keep in their mind strongly open to ethics.
It is good to promote alternative methods for the hazard assessment of substances in order to reduce the number of chemical exposure. Thus, there is more to bank on. And here are some of the recommendations for this case study. First is the curative kind of policy, which should be a help in order to repair damage inflicted upon it, as it was stated that nature can no longer cure itself. The next one was based on the precautionary principle, the anticipatory environmental policy, which is emerging. Uncertainty should no longer delay the adoption of measures intended to anticipate environmental degradation. And lastly, in December 2000, resolution adopted by European heads of state at the NICE summit clearly states that measures taken on the basis of the precautionary principle should be continuously re-examined in the light of the development of scientific knowledge. In order to reduce the level of uncertainty, follow-up of the effects of decisions should be implemented and further research should be carried out. The following are the references of this case study in case you want to read further or to know more about the case of REACH. And that would be all. Thank you for listening.